Hello my loves, I'm Ellie Frost, and on this channel we're talking about the multi-dimensional approach to rapidly and radically healing and transforming during and after narcissistic abuse. And this video is about how the narcissist will punish you, right? So we take a multi-dimensional approach, which means physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, and psychically, because narcissistic abuse is a multi-dimensional attack and it affects us on multi-dimensional levels, particularly in our energy field, right? And in my work, like by repairing our energy field, right, the other things get sorted, basically, right? We get to release the trauma, we get to restore our energy field and become resilient. But let's talk about this topic today, right? So if you've been researching narcissists, you probably have heard, or you might have heard of the concept of narcissistic injury and narcissistic rage, right? You can cause a narcissistic injury, right, from something that you wouldn't expect. The narcissist is not some tortured soul. See my video on that if you haven't, because it's a great video to explain how they're not secretly in pain and trauma. They're the ones that cause the trauma. But actually, right, you can actually, they've got such a big ego, but you can actually sort of hurt their egotistical ways, not knowing, right, just by not being what they want you to be. Right? Remember, the narcissist is so detached, and you in this relationship dynamic have to become what the narcissist needs you to be. If you don't, right, you cause a narcissistic injury. Sometimes that will lead to narcissistic rage, but always the narcissist is keeping score, and eventually they will punish you, right? That could look like anything. Aggression, passive aggression, withdrawing love, neglect. They're going to do those things anyway, but they keep score and they justify every awful thing they do, right, by something that you've done that you may not know has ever, you know, affected them in any way. And it's not affected them on an emotional level because the narcissist doesn't have the emotional capacity that we have, but it's injured their ego, right? You're not being their slave. You're not being what they need. So the thing to know about this, and actually what I really want to talk about in terms of our own healing, is when I grew up with narcissistic parents. I'm going to share more about my story because I haven't done that recently, and I think it's important to know because I grew up with two narcissistic parents, right? And what we learn to do from this is punish ourselves from these cycles, right? I remember being too scared to put my hand up in school, even though I was a grade A student. I was a straight A student. I remember my English teacher saying to me, I think you're arrogant because you get A stars and A grades all the time, and you don't even put your hand up and share with the class. And I started shaking and crying, and she understood then that it wasn't arrogance, it was fear. Why? Because if I was so scared of getting anything wrong, I was so heavily criticized and punished and neglected at home that if I ever had an opinion or asked a question that my parents didn't like, the narcissistic injury and rage would kick in and I would get punished in some way. So I was too scared of getting something wrong. But what I also learned was to punish myself, and I still work on this to this day, right? Healing is a journey, it's not a destination. We evolve through our healing, through releasing trauma, through letting go of these chains, right? I feel like in my work, all healing is reclamation of self. It's reclaiming fragments, pieces of ourselves that are not whole in us, right? That we've got to reclaim our true selves, our authentic power. So what we learn to do is punish ourselves, be very hard on ourselves, be very critical of ourselves, right? Ruminate on ourselves, blame ourselves, especially when we've been around narcissists, because we don't understand why someone's treating us so terribly, especially after they've love bombed us. And remember, I need to talk more about this too. Love bombing doesn't have to be some big gesture. It's just when the narcissist projects on you who you want them to be. It's how they manipulate you, right, into the illusion of who their false self, right, their false self. So the most shocking thing, and the thing we have to heal from, and we have to heal our hearts from, is the self-punishment, the self-criticism, the self-blame, right? Forgiving ourselves for the situations and forgiving the people that are involved. It is the people that have hurt us the most that cause the most trauma, much more than the event we've been through. It's the betrayal. It's the feeling of unsafety in the world. It's the feeling that we're wrong or there must be something. I remember, like, for my whole life, because of the way my parents treated me, I couldn't be good enough, right? And I grew up thinking there was something so inherently wrong with me, right? For my parents not to love me. I didn't understand that they couldn't show me love. I didn't know what a narcissist was, and I wouldn't even admit that I'd been abused till I got to 30. I couldn't accept that, right? I wanted to live in the fairy tale that my parents loved me, despite how awfully they treated me. Yeah? Absolutely disgusting, some of the behaviors, but I wasn't ready yet to accept that. So I thought it was my fault. I thought I was to blame. I thought, and I studied law of attraction and many different things. So like I, at that time, thought everyone was mirroring me. It was all my fault. It's got nothing to do with you if you've been through this cycle. Narcissism is a very niche subject that needs to be much better understood. And I don't think the psychology world is giving us the full picture, because it's projecting empathy on people that have none, right? So we think this has got something to do with ourselves. We have to release that now. Right? We have to release that blame. It's got nothing to do with you, how they treated you, and it's not your responsibility. They're not mirroring you. Narcissists are a particular type of basically operating with an entity of consciousness that we're calling narcissism, that has a particular pattern and sequence, right? And it's a very destructive energy on the planet. It's got nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. But the wounds that we get from this and the traumas we get from this are about self-blame, self-criticism. We might, low self-worth, low self-confidence. I saw a comment on the channel just recently about how hard it is to trust people again and rebuild confidence. I'm going to talk more on these topics because I'm about our healing journey, not just educating us about narcissism, but actually how we can set ourselves free. Sovereignty is reclamation of self, our sovereign selves, our true selves, right? So please check out my program on that because it's so powerful. But like just the work we do here matters, right? Just the healing that we can do in this kind of environment where we just draw awareness on things and actually reclaim ourselves. And I'm going to focus on that for us because it is about like understanding that healing is when we reclaim ourselves, bits of our soul, bits of our bits that have been fragmented, bits where we've people pleased, bits where we're punishing ourselves. We've got to come out of this punishment. We've got to forgive ourselves for the past. The amount of blame and shame we carry through these cycles is exactly what the narcissist wants, and it keeps us stuck. It's hard to trust ourselves when we've repeated these cycles. I got into many narcissistic relationships. I could see it in my clients, I can see it in my friends, I could see it in everything when I understood this, when I finally woke up. And it's like, trusting ourselves to form healthy I promise you this is possible though, and I've got the way forward for us on this, but that it's part of my life's mission to do this with people, because I want to show us that you can break all these cycles, and a lot of these cycles are generational. There's patterns in our DNA that have led us to where we are right now today. Yeah, trauma is not just carried like from what we've experienced in this lifetime, it's also carried in our DNA energetically, right? So we get to release that and heal now. And by doing that, we actually get to be in our authentic power and truth. Then we're a match for our most authentic lives, right? So when we're in our authentic power, when we're free to be truly ourselves, when we've reclaimed those parts of us that have been fragmented, then we're a match to the true love of our lives, the true fulfillment of our lives, the true purpose of our lives, right? But before that, we're not, because we're not quite whole. Like wholeness just means reclamation of self, right? Like we're not giving parts of ourselves away. We're letting go of programs and coping mechanisms and survival mechanisms that have kept us not fully ourselves, right? We might never have been fully ourselves in our lives because we might never have had permission. In the narcissistic abuse cycle, you're not free to be yourself. You are what the narcissist needs you to be, and it's a survival process. It triggers our survival mechanisms in our brains, and we think we have to do that to survive. And I definitely did as a child. I had to become what my parents needed me to be, and I could never get that right. But at least I found survival mechanisms. The challenge was I carried that onto all my relationships. I no longer and I stopped trusting in people and the planet. I isolated myself. I was extremely self-conscious. I healed from this, and and all that kind of stuff. But there were times where I had very, very chronically low self-esteem. Couldn't accept success, couldn't accept love, couldn't accept visibility. I've never been able to do this then and be so open, because I was trained, right, not to cause narcissistic injury. I would never even speak about what they did. I remember my boyfriend's mum once said, look, if your dad can do it, you can say it, because she could tell how traumatized I'd been from an experience, but I couldn't say it, right? So these these cycles take a while to break, and like it's a journey of healing. But the first thing is we reclaim ourselves and we stop blaming ourselves, we stop shaming ourselves, and we stop punishing ourselves, right? So if you want to learn more about how I can work with you on that, please check out the comments. Please keep liking, subscribing and sharing. I'm so happy that you're here. This work means the world to me. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.